So thank you. And thank you both Jerry and Lori for inviting me to speak to you about one of my passions, news literacy. As Jerry mentioned, I taught at Emory University and actually introduced news literacy to the curriculum there in 2008, when fake news wasn't even a thing. No one had even heard of news literacy then. And now we are just inundated with misinformation and disinformation on social media and all over the internet every single day. I believe there is a huge need to teach news literacy beginning in elementary school and all the way through college. In fact, Stanford University published a study back in 2016 about digital literacy. Almost 8,000 students in middle school, high school, and college in 12 states participated, and it revealed how ill-prepared students of all ages are to judge the credibility and trustworthiness of information that they find online. Now, I want to tell you today quickly about one experiment at the university level. These two Stanford researchers, Sam Weinberg and Sarah McGrew, asked 45 people to evaluate the credibility of a real website called minimumwage.com. This experiment pitted 25 Stanford undergraduates among the best and the brightest students in the country, 10 PhD history professors from 4 different universities, against 10 professional journalist fact checkers. Now, they sent them to this website, minimumwage.com, and they discovered dramatic and disturbing differences in how very intelligent people evaluate the information they find on the web. Now, the undergrads and the professors basically stayed on the site and read what we call vertically, meaning that they never left that website, and they did a close textual analysis of what was said on the website. And they also focused on the site's overall look, the aesthetics, the graphics, the logo. And they treated the site as though it were already vetted information because it was online and it looked good. But of course, it wasn't, because anyone can put anything on the web. That is what you
Sissel,
have
may
to
I
remember.
interrupt?
Yeah.
Your deck is not on the screen. We're seeing you. I don't know if you want to.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm going to launch that in
Okay,
a few minutes.
just want to make sure.
This is my setup. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the professional fact checkers took a completely different approach. They knew that even though this site may look legitimate, it might not be. So the professional fact checkers knew spending even a minute of their precious time on a website whose content was not accurate and not factually correct would be a waste of their time. And they also knew not to let the fancy logos and graphics drive them to their decision. So when they landed on this unfamiliar site, which I'm going to show you later, they didn't waste any time in that close textual analysis, which, by the way, is what we were all taught to do in high school and college. Instead, they opened up another tab on their browser to find out who was behind the information. And within 60 to 90 seconds, they all 10, figured out that this site was a fiscally conservative think tank aimed at reducing the minimum wage and backed by Richard Berman, who is a lobbyist, later profiled on 60 Minutes, because this wasn't his only website. He used a lot of official sounding nonprofit groups as a front for his corporate clients. Only 40% of the students and professors ended up rating the site as unreliable. Only 5% of the Stanford students discovered that link to Berman, but 100% of the fact checkers made the connection right away and realized this is not a reliable source of information, and literally in a fraction of the time. The students and the history professors had 20 minutes, which most of them used most of that time. The fact checkers, 60 to 90 seconds, they had a verdict on the site. Now, the researchers, as you can imagine, were blown away and studied the fact checkers and their assessment practices. And they coined this phrase, lateral reading, which you are going to know all about by the end of my talk today, to describe this method. Weinberg and McGrew did a blockbuster white paper on these experiments, and they got a lot of press. And the bottom line of their report was that lateral reading is a must-have 21st century skill to navigate our information ecosystem. And our current approach to teaching digital literacy is simply inadequate. And students do not have even the basic skills they need to verify digital information. And as a teacher on the front lines, I could not agree more. Lateral reading has been a real game changer for me, for my students, because you don't waste any time on sites that aren't worth your time. And I am going to be giving you a quick lesson on how to read laterally in the next part of the presentation, which I am going to share with you now. So let me share my screen. Can everybody see that? Yes? Okay, great. And I'm going to play from the start. So here is my information if you ever want to get in contact with me after the talk. And we're going to start off with a poll. And I just want, this is some news from Ukraine with the war going on. This is definitely something that might pop up in your feed. And Lori, if you could launch the first poll, if you just saw this without doing any further investigation, would you say that this tweet is a reliable source of information? Yes, no, or not sure is an option at this point. I am going to show you these again at the end of the lecture. And I've just two to show you, and we will eliminate not sure because you're gonna know how to look at these next two tweets to verify them. All right, so did everyone take that poll? Okay, so no or not sure, that's great. And how about this next one? So the last one was the Ukraine beauty. Here is if we could launch this next poll. Here's a Jack Russell Terrier who got a medal from Ukrainian President Zelensky. What do you think? If this showed up in your feed, yes, no, or not sure? All right. And the results are, okay, some yes, some no, most of you not sure. Okay, that's good. So you're going to learn how to verify this information. We're going to come back to those, as I said, at the end of the slide. So basically, in the interest of time, I am going to give you 5 tips to become a smarter news consumer. Read laterally, practice good information hygiene, create a healthy news diet, read past the headline, and be your own fact checker. So we're going to talk about each one of those. And if you do have a question as I'm speaking, go ahead and put that either in the chat or I don't know if this is a webinar, there's another place for it. But as the questions come up, go ahead and put them in the chat, and then I will get to all of those at the end. Okay, so read laterally. This is that skill that I told you about. That is a real game changer that will make it super fast and easy for you to find out who's behind information online just as quickly and efficiently as the fact checkers do. And we always want to know who's behind the information so we don't get fooled by sites that are run by lobbyists or political parties pretending to be news sites. That is definitely a movement afoot now, is making advertisements or think tanks actually look credible and authoritative to fool people when they really are just trying to persuade people to take a position or believe information that's not true. You want to know how to find, obviously, verified, vetted information, not information that's intended to manipulate you. So here is that site. This is what it looks like. And it is the one that they used in the experiment, minimumwage.com. And if you came across it, you probably would assume it contains reliable information because it looks very legit. It's well written. It has links to data and study. It has a nice logo. But how can you be sure? You need to find out who is behind this information. And what I teach students, and what the fact checkers actually coined, is this Wikipedia trick. You strip off, as you can see up here, the www, you just keep minimumwage.com space and Wikipedia, okay? And that search up here triggers an omnibar search and brings you right away to the first entry in Wikipedia. Now, a lot of people say, Wikipedia, you trust Wikipedia. Wikipedia is our starting point. And Wikipedia is actually not that bad. They've done very large studies on it. And 80 to 85% of the information on there is actually accurate. Okay, that's a lot, that's not. But as I said, this is just a starting point, and it's for a very quick search. So here we are. This is the first entry that you see. Employment Policies Institute. What is that? Well, if you actually click on it, you will see that it is a fiscally conservative, nonprofit American think tank that conducts and publishes research on employment issues, particularly aimed towards reducing the minimum wage. Established in 1991 by Richard Berman, and has been described as a nonprofit research group that studies the issues of entry-level employment. Okay, so this all of a sudden now should get your antenna up. This is not a think tank that looks at both sides of the issue. This is a group where restaurants and the alcohol, hotel, beverage industry pay Richard Berman to set up this website. And they actually conduct research to come up with certain outcomes. And don't just take Wikipedia's word for it. You can do another search and come to find out that lots of news organizations, like the New York Times, salon.com, and Center for Ethics also looked into Richard Berman. And they saw that this is really a scam with PR firms and lobbyists posing as think tanks online. So is this site a source of reliable information? That's sort of what the home page looks like. Definitely not. It's not a source of reliable information because it's not going to present both sides of the debate or any data that undermines its message. In fact, as I mentioned, the Group for Citizen for Ethics found that it pays researchers to produce results consistent with the group's mission. And I actually wrote a post about this on my website, newsliteracymatters.com, about Wikipedia if you're interested, using this Stanford experiment as an example. The next thing that I want you to think about is what we call practicing good information hygiene. So you've all heard about washing your hands, right, for 20 seconds. Well, we should also just take 20 seconds, which is nothing, to do a quick lateral reading search when you come across information that you're not sure about before you share it online. And once you get into the habit of doing this, scrubbing the information, you will get very quick at it. Definitely don't share information without verifying it, because then you are part of the problem of all this misinformation and disinformation that we have online. And my last tip is to really keep your emotions in check. The way social media platforms work is they keep sending you information to engage you. So the key thing that they look at is actually time. How much time have you spent on a post? The posts that you spend the most time on, they will keep sending you more and more of them. And they will start taking you. We looked at a piece in my class on the Wall Street Journal. I can share the link with you if you're interested. This is on TikTok. They looked at how much time you spent on each post. Let's say you just had a general interest in politics, and they did an experiment where they set up all these fake accounts with these different interests. And one of them was politics, general interest. And the bot just kept spending more and more time on it. Soon they were going down a rabbit hole about the big lie and that the 2020 election was stolen. And because that content kept engaging the bot more and more and more. So this is what they are trying to play on, your emotions. And it could be things that make you happy. My husband gets a lot of pug dogs. We have always had pug dogs. And on Instagram, he spends, I don't know how much time every day looking at the pugs. And it's self-fulfilling because the more time he spends, the more they're going to send him, but also in ways that are not so benign. So my advice is keep your emotions in check. Beware of your emotional response. Beware of headlines and stories that are designed to elicit an emotional reaction, whether it is happiness or outrage or indignation. You really want to pause and take a breath and think critically about any story that gets you worked up, because along with speed, actually rushing, not taking 20 seconds, emotion can be a major barrier to identifying trustworthy information. In fact, Claire Wardle, who is a great researcher in this field and co-founder of First Draft, which is a nonprofit dedicated to studying misinformation, says the more your response is emotional, the less likely it is to be accurate. So as I said, social media platforms are very good at putting information in your feed that is going to elicit an emotional response because they want to keep you engaged. They want to keep you on their platform. All right, tip number 3, create a healthy news diet. We've all heard you are what you eat, right? Well, the same holds with the news that we consume. Like any healthy diet, we need to be much more selective about the information that we take in every day. Of course, many of us are torn between a desire to stay informed and a desire to stay sane, right? Because there is so much information out there. So this doesn't mean just limiting your consumption arbitrarily. It means being much more discriminating. Pick, I suggest, 1 to 2 go-to news outlets that you trust and sign up for their morning newsletter and their alerts. And that's it for in terms of all the stuff coming in to your phone. Think about it as a food pyramid. You want to be consuming more healthy news stories from sources that verify and vet the information that they share. You want to be consuming thoughtful opinions from people with whom we disagree, in-depth policy explanations, news about unfamiliar topics. And we want to stay away from news that resembles junk foods, like the news that tastes great, feels great, but is actually not that good for you. So in this category, I put clickbait, hyper-partisan news that conforms to your worldview or your political view, and any coverage that mocks viewpoints that you disagree with. This is not healthy news, and you definitely don't want to be consuming that. You also want to include a variety of sources and platforms. So if you're getting all your news on cable television, you got to branch out. Same thing if you're just getting all your news online. Introduce some NPR or PBS or some online news sites, perhaps from overseas. For example, The Guardian is a great website. It's a UK-based newspaper, and they do a lot of amazing reporting, not only in the US and the UK, but around the world. So think about adding some news sites to make your diet a little bit more balanced. And you also want to consciously vary the perspectives of your news sources. Humans are programmed to look for information that affirms pre-existing beliefs. So you need to expose yourself deliberately to other points of view. Just as food companies learn that if they want to sell, a lot of junk food, they're going to pack it with salt and fat and sugar, the stuff that people crave. Media companies also have learned that affirmation sells a lot more information than news that perhaps you disagree with. Okay? Affirmation sells a lot more information. So who wants to hear the truth when you can hear you're right? We all do it, right? We're all drawn to people who, echo an echo chamber where we hear our own views reverberating back at us. That's very, very normal. And that's why you have to deliberately try to expose yourself to other views. Now, many people ask me, which news sources are unbiased and the most reliable? Well, it would be great if there were one news organization I could say, well, go here and you're going to be fine. Unfortunately, that does not exist. There is just no completely unbiased news, and there is no news that is 100% accurate 100% of the time. Absolute objectivity is a myth, and really the best way to find fair and accurate information is to have a varied news diet and to expose yourself, as I said, to these other views. Now, what is this? This is a chart it's called a media bias chart created by Vanessa Otero at Adfontes. It's sort of a consumer reports for the news media. And it's a very unique way of laying out our complex media landscape in 2 dimensions. So we have reliability here on this axis, the x-axis. So here, the highest quality, most reliable news is up at the top, and down here contains inaccurate, fabricated information. And here on this axis, we have bias. Here on all the way over to the right-wing news outlets, all the way to the left-wing news outlets. So left for liberal, right for more conservative, which totally makes sense. I'm going to show you a blown up version so you can see which outlets this group considers the most reliable. And I would tend to agree. So up here, we've got AP and Reuters. So these are, formerly wire services, but they still are doing a lot of great reporting all around the world. And Adfontes, the people behind this chart, evaluate 104 sources right now. And these are definitely the top ones. And you're probably not surprised. The Wall Street Journal, which is probably the most popular publication for people on both the right and the left. It's a little bit to the right of center, but very high on accuracy. Here's the BBC, very similar, ABC, CBS, NPR, USA Today. These are all sort of at the same level of accuracy, but they do have different partisan tilts. New York Times, as you would expect, probably is over here, definitely skews left, as the Wall Street Journal tends to skew right. Okay. Next up, if you are interested in learning more about this, I've actually written several posts on how we can find unbiased news, how to prevent information overload, and this is my shameless plug. You can subscribe and you only get a notification when we publish something new. But we have over 100 of these posts, and these are actual questions from students in my class. It's a way for us to continue the conversation outside of class. And it really pulls back the curtain on what is good journalism and what should you demand from the news outlets and news organizations that you follow and that you read. So yeah, if you're interested, please take a look. And as I said, you only get an email when we posted something new, and it's generally during the semester. I don't do too much during the summer, so it's going to start up again in the fall. But we have, as I said, over 100 posts on anything and everything to do with news literacy. Next tip, read past the headline. Unbelievably, 6 out of 10 people will share a link by just looking at the headline. They have no idea what the story actually says. And it's actually gotten people in trouble. And here's the problem. First of all, the reporters don't even write the headlines. I don't know if you all know that. It's the editors. And the editors often write headlines as clickbait just to get you to click on it. And, I'm sure that's happened to you. Sometimes you clicked on something and, it's a real letdown because the story does not line up or deliver on what the headline promised. Unfortunately, that is the reality. And before you share anything in your social media feeds or before you forward something to your family and friends, make sure you've read the whole story so you know what it is really about. And finally, you want to be your own fact checker. What this means is don't confuse the sender of the information with the source of the information. So studies have also shown that if you get something from someone in your network, for example, someone from Beacon, you are going to be much more likely to believe it and much more likely to pass it on. But you really cannot abdicate the responsibility you have to fact check information that you pass on. It again is human nature that the person who shares a news story on the social media platform is more important than the story's actual source. That is what they have found and what I have found to be true with my family and friends. But you definitely cannot assume that that is a trusted piece of information just because it came from someone in your network. Don't outsource your judgment to others. Do the fact checking yourself. So to wrap up, here is the takeaway. It is up to each of us to take on fake news and misinformation and the bots and the trolls, friends and family, really anyone spreading misinformation. And people who expect the big players in our world right now, like Elon Musk, who may or may not be buying Twitter, Mark Zuckerberg, or the Supreme Court, or Congress, or even the president to fix this problem, will be waiting a very long time. Quite frankly, you also don't want to be abdicating your right to make the judgment yourself, to do the fact checking yourself about what is factual and reliable. Being less informed undermines our democracy, as we saw, and we've seen it in real life. January 6, 2021, people were misinformed who stormed the Capitol. And our democracy is really at risk because of all this misinformation and disinformation. And as the late Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts. It is up to you and no one else to make sure you are armed with the facts. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a chance to practice your lateral reading. So hopefully you can do this on your phone or open another window on your laptop. I want you to, and we'll be launching polls. Tell me first, is the American Academy of Pediatrics a reliable source of information? So you want to be using your lateral reading Wikipedia trick for this. So go ahead if you want to participate and just put in aap.org space Wikipedia, and then look at that entry. And then we'll launch the poll and see how many of you got that right. Both of these sites look like trustworthy sources of information by just looking, but one of them is not. And I don't think, unless you're a pediatrician, you would know just by looking. All right, Lori, do you want to launch that poll for the first one? Yeah.
I actually have them together, but we'll
okay.
Pick.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So everyone, go ahead and do both of them. The next one is the American College of Pediatricians. So you'd put in acpeds.org space Wikipedia and see what you come up with. And you'll see how fast lateral reading is.
So Sissel, can you just explain a little bit more about what you mean by reliable? We had a question as to whether or not it was biased or not, just make sure we have clarity.
Yeah, so reliable source is a source that presents factually accurate information that has been verified. So, you know, facts are facts. There aren't alternative facts. You can have opinions, but there's no such thing as two versions of a fact. So reliable information presents facts.
We have about 2/3 of the folks completed. Do you want to keep it open a little longer? Sissel, what's your call?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It maybe not everyone is doing it. We can probably put it up now. Okay, very good. So the first one, the American Academy of Pediatrics, that is the group that was founded in 1930. It has 67,000 members. These are pediatricians that are, licensed. And this is the website for pediatricians. The next one, the American College of Pediatricians. This one is actually, as you saw on Wikipedia, a socially conservative advocacy groups of pediatricians focused on advocating against abortion and the adoption of children by gay or lesbian people, and also advocates conversion therapy. So again, not a reliable source of information about pediatrics. So that's the real beauty of lateral reading. You would know who's behind that. Now, maybe you agree with, the American College of Pediatricians. That's fine, but it's not going to be your first stop for information about pediatricians and pediatrics. Okay, let's go back now to the first tweet that I showed you. Most of you were unsure about this. Now, it's going to be a little bit hard to do a lateral reading search on this because it's so current, right? This is from April 18th. You can do the same thing in the Omnibar search. So on the top bar, you can do a fact check. So you write actually the words fact check and then space, and then copy this language exactly. Ukrainian beauty blew up 52 invading Russian tanks. What this does, it will call up any fact checks that have been done on this tweet. And you will very quickly be able to determine whether this is true or not. Now, one of these is true, one, well, I'm not going to say. We'll see. So go ahead and launch it. Yeah. And, you know, this is really great. Lots of fact checks are being done now, and you are harnessing the power of all these other fact checkers out there to save yourself some time. Okay, exactly. This is not a source of reliable information. She actually is in the Ukrainian military as a medical doctor, but she did not blow up 52 invading tanks. And you can see that just by doing this fact check here. There was one at Reuters, AP, actually a news literacy organization did it. So that's a very quick way to do it. I'm going to teach you one other way you can do it. It's a little more complicated, but especially if you use Chrome, you can do what we call a reverse image search. Here's the fact check. Yeah. So you can either take a screenshot of just the picture and drag it to this site called tineye.com. And it will search all references to this picture on the whole World Wide Web. And what I found interesting is look at this date, 2021. So the same picture was out there in 2021. That is a very common way to misinform people, by taking an old picture and putting it in the wrong context. So in fact, here is the story of this medical doctor from August 8th, 2021, that they just recycled, repurposed with this false message or this false post. Very, very common way of creating misinformation online. If you were on Chrome, you could actually right click on the picture, just right click on the image, and you have an option to do a Google image search, which accomplishes the same thing. So you can see if there are any past references to this photo, or you can see if it's been manipulated because you can see the original. That's another very common form of misinformation and disinformation. All right, let's try the next one. So same thing, fact check. And then this one you can actually summarize a little bit. You don't have to put all this in. I would say Terrier receives service medal, you know, in Ukraine, something like that, from Zelensky. See what comes up with that. Okay. Good job. So this one is actually true, right? And all you have to do is, as I said, fact check, Terrier awarded medal Ukraine. BBC has a story about it, NPR, Reuters. So these are among our most reliable news sources, according to the media bias chart, right? So you could be comfortable that this was actually this tweet was a reliable source of information. So Jerry, what should we do now at this point? I have like two more examples. Do you want me to go to those, or should I stop sharing my screen, go to questions? What do you think is best?
You know, it's been a fascinating chat room conversation going on. Before we do that, I think I'd like to give the participants an opportunity to raise their hands and jump on and ask you a question as opposed to reading chat. So Beaconers, if you could, you know, if somebody's got a question, you know, please unmute and ask. Joe, I know you had quite a few going on there.
Me?
Yeah, you had some great comments, dude.
Thanks.
I think
I did. I had a question in there somewhere. What did
What
I
about
ask?
news and opinions? I thought that was a great
Yeah,
question.
well, that's a observation. So, I mean, Wall Street Journal news is pretty good. Their opinion page is very much to the right. Um, and what did I write?
I think you were talking about the propaganda versus the bias, and if you read both ends, one could be extreme and the other one could be just a little slanted, and then the middle is still extreme. And how do you deal with that?
Right. I mean, was it one American News or whatever it is, who just had to issue retractions on air because they had a settlement with the election workers down in Georgia because they just lied about what they did in the election, and they had to pay a bunch of money and whatever. So the propaganda site not generally having good stuff. Well, I can pick something over there and pick something over at MSNBC, who left leaning but generally fact based. I'm not in the middle between those. And Fox, are you listening to Brett Baer, or you're listening to Tucker Carlson? I mean, those are very different parts of that organization. And again, putting it's Fox News, I'm going to put it here, and MSNBC's here, and they're equal. Well, sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. Same thing for perhaps some of the MSNBC hosts and what they're doing. So you really have to put more into those comparisons than just a straight look at them.
Yeah, I think that's a very astute observation by Joe, and why it's so difficult, and especially for students, who tend to take things much more at face value, to realize that some people are in the business of providing propaganda, even though it calls itself news. And others are presenting a more biased view, a more opinion view. So a lot of Americans, in fact, only 1 in 4 Americans in a Pew Research poll that I use in class are able to tell the difference between statements that are factual statements and statements that are opinion. Only 25% got all 10 right. So people have a lot of trouble because of their worldview, or because they're not reading it or thinking about it very carefully, telling the difference between opinion and news. And that's a real problem for us. And we spend a whole unit on news versus opinion and how to tell the difference. And as I said, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. A fact is a fact. And facts can change. I'm not saying that it's fixed in time forever. Pluto used to be a planet when I studied the solar system. Then it went to a dwarf planet. Well, guess what? It's back to being a big real planet again. So this is as scientists, learn more and more about the solar system. They have more powerful telescopes. So, truth is what we call provisional. And that's really how the scientific community approaches truth. Truth changes over time with evidence.
Yeah, the thing I sort of asked about, and I think I have my own view of it, but whether or not an outlet issues ever or frequently corrections or retractions when they get something wrong. And granted, yes, the original was on page 1 and the retractions on page 23, but if someone never does that, that raises a red flag.
Absolutely. There are 3 hallmarks to reliable journalism: verification. They verify the facts, all the facts in their stories. Independence. They're independent from any corporate sources or anyone at the news organization that's trying to curry advertisers. And the last one that Joe mentioned is accountability, and that is all about correcting their mistakes. And now you probably have seen this online. The mistakes are right at the bottom of the story. When you read a story online, you can see at the bottom what the mistakes were and how they corrected them. And, in the print newspaper, it used to be not on page 1, but it was on page 2, Joe. So, not front page news, which, they should, in many cases have done. But the news outlets that are accountable definitely should, earn your trust more than someone that doesn't.
Well, thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Sissel?
Maybe
Okay,
put it in the chat and we can read it.
Yeah, let's go to Susie real quick.
Here we go. I think you just unmuted me. I think it was a host issue. I was unable to unmute. Now I can. Sissel, this has been one really fascinating discussion. Thanks for all your information. A lot of research went into this. I just have a question about your opinion about something. What do you think about the all this?
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I'm not sure why you keep muting me, but
I was trying to give everybody the power to unmute themselves.
am I saying something that offensive? If I am, I apologize.
It's telling me that you had the power. I was just trying to find out why it wasn't working. Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. Just joking. What do you think about the ban on certain people that these social media outlets deem as, issuing propaganda, untruths, fake news? Versus the First Amendment rights? This whole thing with Elon Musk and Twitter. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Section 230 as part of the Communications Decency Act. These are the 26 words that created the internet back in 1993, I think, if my memory is correct. And that act, that law, removed liability for anything published on social media platforms. So they could not be sued for anything that is on their platforms. And that was a real competitive advantage compared to, a normal journalism site, which is liable for everything on its site, even ads. But it did allow the internet to grow and flourish into what it is today. So there are now a lot of calls out there for some kind of reform. And I think this is what your question is getting at, Mark, but tell me if not, of this basically carte blanche, anything can be published online and nobody is responsible for it. There are no consequences. So there's a lot of what we call malinformation. Those are those like sex videos that disgruntled exes put up on, the internet for everyone to see. Should that be allowed? There's a lot of hate speech, which actually is a carve out of the First Amendment, but that somehow managed to survive on these social media platforms. And then there's a much more gray area, these conspiracy theories. Now, particularly with COVID, we saw this. There's something known as the disinformation dozen that our Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is one of the top ones that put out 3/4 of the misinformation about COVID, and they actually profit from it. They profit from it. Now, is that speech that should be regulated? That probably has cost people their lives. So it's a very thorny question. And then you have conservative voices, what you refer to in your question, that feel like they are being silenced unfairly. For example, President Trump being taken off Twitter because of he was posting so much disinformation. They are private companies, so they say they can do it. I don't know. I think that there needs to be something done with people who are a lot smarter than I am. Obviously, I'm a huge believer in the First Amendment, but I also see the great harm that unfettered social media can do. And there actually is agreement in Congress on both the Republican side and the Democratic side to make some changes to Section 230 so that these platforms, are not going to just be able to look the other way for everything. There are also a lot of scams on these platforms that people get caught up in. And that's something that they're going to address. So I don't know where we're going to end up. It's really the issue of our time, I think, going forward, because many of these things are so dangerous. These conspiracy theories are very, very dangerous. But I don't know how they're going to do it, but I do think that something needs to be done on those extreme cases. And they have several bills in Congress right now. I actually have a post on that I did earlier this year on newsliteracymatters.com.
A quick comment. I really appreciate the presentation. I think it was right on track. I grew up in a world of intelligence and counterintelligence in my military and in my military days. And this is basically taking the same techniques and processes that we had to use to try and figure out whether the intelligence we had was real or not.
Yeah.
And moving it into the public sector. And I think what's happened is the internet has made it important for everybody, all the consumers, to understand these concepts. I think I don't think the answer is controlling the media. I think the answer is educating the people who are reading the media to learn how to decipher things that are accurate or not. Most of it's, like you said, multiple sources, verifying sources, watching out for even the good news sources that you have at the top of your pyramid there. If they're all getting their feed from Reuters and that feed is somehow corrupted, they're all sending out corrupted information, and it looks like
That's right.
they have the right information. So it's really good that you're doing this, and I think we need more education of the consumers, because it's too easy just to find the facts that fit your views and adopt them. So
Yeah, most
thanks.
people are very passive consumers of news. You know, they have their go-to site, and whatever they see or hear, they believe it. They aren't taking the time to actually fact check, or get news from multiple sources, because it does take a long time, right? We're all dealing with information overload. That's a huge problem for people. And it's actually a technique, Tim, you may know about that, but many authoritarian leaders, they flood their media with so much news, quote unquote, so much information that people throw their hands up like, I don't believe anything. And we're getting to that point in our country. People don't believe anything. And that is a technique that paves the way for a strongman authoritarian leader to come in.
So just to dovetail off of what Tim was saying. So is part of this caused by what I perceive as happened a few years ago? There's been a great slashing of true journalism, of people available to go and personally investigate things. That's my impression, is that we don't have a lot of true journalists. So in Tim's example, Reuters reports it, and there's maybe a flaw in it because they're a trusted source. I certainly trust them. Everybody else reports it also. And then by the time it's revealed that it wasn't actually true, it's already imprinted on the minds of many. Is that part of the issue?
Well, two-part answer to that. Number one, local journalism has been decimated. It started in 2008, and then COVID took out the remaining local journalism. So now we don't have journalists going to school board meetings, town council meetings, and writing stories about the stuff that connects us, regardless of our political views in our communities. So we're losing that connectedness because we don't share common experiences. We're not reading about those kind of experiences. So that's a real problem, and there are a lot of really interesting innovations right now to try to resuscitate local news, local journalism. Margaret Sullivan just wrote a really interesting book about that. She's the media critic for the Washington Post. The second part is that real journalists don't, take someone else's report and just repeat it. So there are people who do that. It's called the out there syndrome. We saw a lot during Hurricane Katrina. When there was a talk of in the convention center, 5-year-olds with their throats slit and being raped, and 40 bodies in the convention center freezer. That was reported by one Times-Picayune reporter and picked up by everyone except, I want to say, AP and the New York Times. But it was like on the Financial Times, it was all over. People just latched onto that because it fit with their preconceived notions of New Orleans being a really, crime-ridden city. And it made sense, and everyone ran with it. So that's actually an example that we study now in journalism classes across the country of what not to do. So you can't just take information reported by someone else without confirming it yourself. So that's not good journalism. Anyone who's doing that is, not doing their job.
Just want to add a little bit for the content moderating part on the social media sites. some of the right-wing folks who felt that they were being treated improperly went over to some other news site that they created, and it's going to be free and everybody can post whatever they want, total First Amendment. And it became a shit show, and they ended up starting to moderate their content and doing the same thing because, when you run a site and if you just let anybody do whatever, it can be really ugly really fast. So every social media site has its terms of use, and then they moderate as best they can in accordance with that. They may not do a very good job, and you can argue that in however you want to, but it's extremely difficult and it takes a lot of resources, which they don't want to spend money on because profits and all that stuff. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, and one point is they don't really want to get rid of all that content because their business model, as I said in my talk, is to keep you engaged. And they actually, that's, in direct conflict with moderating content that makes you feel enraged. So believe me, they don't want to take all this stuff down. They could. And in fact, going into the election last year, they took down a lot of content. All they have to do is tweak their algorithm. They have the tools right now to do it. But as soon as the election was over, all that conspiracy theory about the election being a lie and the outcome being rigged came right back because that is how they make money. They make money by you staying on that platform longer. So it's a huge conflict of interest for them. And that's why I think we will end up having to have some kind of regulation.
Sissel, a question. Has there been any extreme left people that you know of that have been banned? Because I haven't heard any extreme left people being banned.
I mean, being banned is actually pretty unusual. Former President Trump is the most high profile one. I think on COVID, that's an equal opportunity conspiracy theorist, topic. So there are a lot of people on the left, I think, that hate vaccines, who have also been banned, I would say. So it's not necessarily a right-wing thing. It depends on the topic, I think. I don't know that though, for sure. That's just my impression.
Do you think it's more the reason they're doing this is because of the ratings and the financial gain from publishing these extreme stories, or is it more philosophical? I guess because the owners of Fox, for instance, are philosophically very right, but it's also a money machine. Do you think they're both, like, if you could sort of address one in some law, could that help things?
Yeah, I mean, the profit motive is huge, right? I mean, I watch Fox News because I like to expose myself to views I don't agree with. That's like an outrage machine. Like, it's all about anger on that channel all the time, anger all the time. And that emotion keeps people engaged. I don't know what the answer is. Fox News is being sued, some of its nighttime hosts, because of what they said about the Dominion voting system. They said that those machines were being rigged by Venezuela, or I don't even know. It's like some crazy. And their lawyers in court said that the Laura Ingraham show and Sean Hannity show are entertainment. Everyone knows they're entertainment. They're not news. That's their defense. The problem is that, like, a lot of the audience doesn't know that. The lawyers may know that, and the hosts may know that, but the audience doesn't know that. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is.
There used to be a long time ago, for those of us a little long in the tooth, every time there was an editorial, there was always an opposing view that they had to put on. I guess they got rid of that, huh?
Yeah, that's like with an election, if you give a certain amount of time to one candidate, you're supposed to give them the others an equal amount of time. Yeah, no, that's not in effect anymore, for sure.
Are there any last questions that we would like to position with Sissel, or points of view we'd like to share before we close up for today?
I'd just like to hear, she said she had some additional lessons to teach us that I'd be interested in.
Okay, well, I have 2 more videos. There you have to think a little creatively on how you would verify this information. I think we have time. I can show them. It'll take about 2 or 3 more minutes each. So let me share my screen again. Okay, so I'm going to play you 2 videos. And knowing now how you can search the internet and fact check on the internet, I want you afterwards, and we do have a poll, I think, Lori, for this one as well, to see whether you think this information is, this is a real video or one of these things that people put on YouTube just to get a lot of clicks, because every time somebody clicks on it, ka-ching, they make money. So let's watch it.
Oh my God, you okay? You okay? Close the door. Close the door back there. Close the door back there. Oh my God. What's that? You're fine. It's okay. It's all right.
Okay, so you could use some of the techniques that we've talked about today to verify or disprove that whether this is a true video or not. We could talk it through, or you could try it. We'll take the poll and then I could tell you how to do it. I had my students do this earlier in the semester. So there's a way to fact check this online without knowing anything about it, just by looking at it. Anyone have any ideas? How would you approach this? Go ahead, Joe.
Hold on a second. I don't know why it's not, I didn't mute anybody back up. So
Maybe put it in the chat, Joe, how you went about it.
you want to try it again, Joe?
Thank you. Yeah, you have to unmute.
I didn't
once
touch
you-
anything from
No,
before.
I know that. Once you mute yourself, you can't unmute yourself again.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
didn't
it's a
know
one
that.
time
Thank
when you release it. Yeah. So I just Googled fact check buck crashes through salon window and got a bunch of articles that said exactly what was going on in the video. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, so you
really
see
true.
if that's exactly what you can do. So, before you shared this with your family and friends, it is quite something, right? You would do a quick fact check, and it took like all of 10 seconds, right? Perfect. Okay, how about this next one?
That's fine. So, it's a little embarrassing, it reminds me, once in Russia, I ran into Gorbachev. He said, Mr. Movie Star, are you nervous? I said, no, Mr. Gorbachev, I'm not nervous. He goes, well, remember how much a polar bear weighs? I said, polar bear? He said, enough to break the ice. It's the last time I've ever seen Mikhail Gorbachev. What's up, TikTok?
All right, I'm not gonna play all of them. Go ahead, what do you think? Anyone have any ideas how to verify that?
Or you have to mute him.
I just did.
Yeah.
Yep, he's
Sorry.
good.
It's
Oh,
just
I
a
was
delay.
actually, when I wrote that, it was for the other video.
Oh, okay.
I have no idea about this video. I don't even know what happened, why it would even be viral, but doesn't seem to be anything unusual. The other one, I would just comment without even looking it up. I thought it was valid because the camera is like, for crime stuff. I'm assuming it's a wide angle camera that's just sitting there. It's not somebody taking a video and seeing it coming in, and the reactions were pretty authentic in my view. So that was what I wanted to comment about. I have no idea about this one, so go to someone else.
Anyone have an idea on how you would fact check this one, Barbara?
Hold
No?
on, go ahead, Barbara.
I have to admit, this one was hard. I could tell it wasn't, because it's not, it's a Tom Cruise lookalike. I could tell as I looked at it. And I tried to put in Tom Cruise drunk, Tom Cruise slipping, falling. I couldn't, nothing came up yet. But I know how to do it.
Doris
I mean,
has a good
I know the process, because I got the one with the moose really well, but this one I had a little bit trouble.
Morris
just
is
put-
on the right track.
I just put in Tom Cruise TikTok fact check.
Ah,
I got several articles
all right.
on TikTok, Tom Cruise deepfake creators, fact checks, and Tom Cruise deepfake. There's several articles on the fact that there's several Tom Cruise fake videos out there.
Yeah,
So,
well,
and given that how choppy it is and how the words didn't match his mouth when he was talking, I just say this is
Yeah,
not a good
that's the key. It's clearly dubbed. So I just said fact check Tom Cruise dubbed, and it comes up with deep fakes as the.
What do you think about Snopes?
Deepfakes are getting better and better, and they are
Yeah.
going to be one of the biggest challenges that we are going to be dealing with in the future, because you're not going to be able to tell. And in fact, there have been studies that we are actually more drawn to fake faces, we human beings, than real faces, than composite faces. And you can't tell on just the faces. The video, there's still a lot of signs, telltale signs, like the blinking, or one ear has an earring, another doesn't, or the hair, is cut off or something. But believe me, the technology it's going to get there. It's going to get there, and they're already using it in against the Ukraine. Russia already made a deep fake video of Zelensky telling his troops to surrender, and he had to get on TikTok and say, "Don't listen to that. That's a deep fake." So this is a really huge, challenging problem for all of us in the future.
What do you think about Snopes?
Yeah, Snopes is one of the fact-checking sites that you can go to. It's reliable, factcheck.org, PolitiFact, AP Fact Check, Reuters Fact Check. Those are all really great ways to save time. Yeah, use those fact-checking sources, and there are so many of them now. Snopes is a good one. All right, well, I think we're going to leave it there. So you guys did great on those examples. So yeah, try to make this part of your daily life now, and you will be much more informed. You'll be part of the solution, because you're not going to be spreading, stories that are not true with, number one, your family and friends, and also with the greater world beyond, your customers, your clients. So yeah, spread the word.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.